I think what we'd like to do now is turn to Dominic Emery joining. A 1 minute introduction. Dominic used to be the head of strategy globally at BP. And when Bernard Looney in December of maybe 15 months ago became the new chief executive officer of BP Global, they appointed, for good reason, Dominic as chief of staff. So I know from the few years I served a White House chief of staff during the Clinton years, that is the ultimate role when it comes to transformation, is to see the hourglass of input from the board, the CEO's office, and the disbursement to the rest of the sand of the organization. So we are incredibly honored that Dominic takes the time to be part of this over the last 3 years. After leading in strategy and becoming the chief of staff, the third and last thing I want to say about Dominic is that every CEO in this mix have had some kind of positive thing to say about Dominic. So I called Lindsay a blessing. Well, what Dominic is an angel of generosity. When you become 66 years old, you don't hedge your praise when you find such exceptional people. Dominic Emery, it's all yours.
Well, Bruce, I hardly know how to follow that. That is deeply kind of you, and many thanks to you, your team, and colleagues here on the phone, on the call for giving me the opportunity, actually, really to kind of take you through and share the progress on this strategic journey that we're making at BP. I mean, it's a real-time strategic journey in a sense that this group have been kind of with me from the start, from when we started to lay out our purpose, as we described back earlier last year with a change in chief executive, and then we kind of migrated that through to our kind of ambitions, our aims, our strategy, and what I'd like to talk a little bit about today is the progress that we're making, some of the challenges that we're seeing as we go through the journey, but also to get your kind of feedback, get your views, opinions. Because this transition is not something at the scale of a company like BP has been really attempted before. We have a number of other European peers who are making the transition at the same kind of time. Some are ahead of us, and we're learning quite a lot from them. But it's an extraordinary kind of tightrope. It's a tightrope and an conversation that we have every day. It's about purpose and performance. It's about oil and gas and renewables and new mobility solutions. It's about the people who have been in the organisation a long time and new people, new recruits, new hires to kind of reinvigorate and bring expertise. And it's about BP and the partners. And we won't be able to get where we want to get to without working alongside both new companies, established companies, as we move into these new territories. So what I'll say just from the start is I'm very happy to kind of stop anywhere through this kind of presentation and take questions. And I will do that as I migrate through, just kind of stop and kind of check in with everybody to take kind of views and questions. And please feel free to ask the difficult questions, because you can be absolutely sure we get plenty of those from our stakeholders and actually from our investors and, of course, from our employees. And we're working through those questions. We want to take the challenge and the questions as we go through this sort of uncharted water. And I think perhaps I'll start, and I'll kind of, if you like, rewind the tape back to February of last year, when we made quite a major sort of a presentation through our new CEO about purpose and about the purpose of the enterprise, and actually had created a very clear sense of purpose in the kind of the months building up to the launch of our purpose and our ambitions and aims, where we spent a lot of time actually speaking with our critics and getting to understand, if you like, their point of view, putting in a sense ourselves in their shoes. And those critics included NGOs, inevitably. It included some government officials. It included kind of wider societal stakeholders. It included academia, and it included investors. And you can see this kind of first slide talks about environmental, social and governance, ESG, only three terms which would become very, very familiar. And they are kind of fundamental. They're now putting sustainability at the heart of BP's strategy. And we talk about delivering value to our stakeholders, and we use stakeholders rather than shareholders kind of in a very kind of knowing way, because societal license to operate is going to be everything as we kind of drive this transition forward. But as I say, I'll kind of going back to February last year, and having listened to our kind of critics, we also sat back and thought, what an extraordinary opportunity this energy transition represents. And the reason for saying that is, depending on whose numbers you look at, whether it's the IEA's numbers from their kind of recent kind of net zero report, whether it's IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, or indeed others, the amount that's going to be required to invest in this energy transition to achieve net zero by the middle of the century is phenomenal. It's of the order of $100 trillion over the next 30 years or so. $3 trillion a year. And as somebody said, and it's a great quote, it's going to be the world's biggest ever purchase order. And so that optimistic perspective on the transition of what's possible and what's needed to replumb and rewire the energy system was really our starting point. Because if you don't take that kind of optimistic point of view, it's actually very difficult to, you're then in kind of defending the status quo, defending the kind of the business that you're in. You're seeing shadows and kind of dangers, and you're not interacting in a positive, progressive way with your stakeholders. So that was kind of really a big point for us. Let's see this as an optimistic enterprise from the get-go. And what we then started to do was kind of build what we felt was a kind of an appropriate purpose. If we move on to the next slide, please, Debbie, that would be great. And so this is a kind of bringing it all together slide, if you like, around our purpose, ambitions, our strategy, and the financial frame. So I'll take you through these different components one by one. Starting with purpose, reimagining energy for people and our planet. So the reimagining energy is, so how can we participate in that kind of $100 trillion opportunity over the next 30 years to transition our business? And for people on our planet, and it's really interesting, the kind of the planet side of things was of particular relevance back in kind of February last year, particularly around net zero, particularly around biodiversity. But with the advent of the pandemic, the people element really came into the fore in a very, very significant way. And that includes the kind of the near-term sort of caring for the communities in which we operate, and in the kind of the longer term, really trying to raise our game on kind of human rights, engagement with communities, engagement with Indigenous people. And so the whole thing came together in a way that I think became quite powerful, and ended up, as you can see from this diagram here, the kind of the bottom area, which is around our kind of sustainability framework, which had kind of getting to net zero at the kind of as a core part of it. But the other important components were around improving people's lives, of our employees, of our kind of stakeholders, the communities where we operate, and care for our planet. And that goes beyond just kind of net zero. That's around kind of biodiversity opportunities, and also the possibility around kind of land carbon, peatlands, wetlands, etc., and kind of restoration there, which led us to kind of thinking about, well, maybe the impact we could have is that we will be net positive. So rather than kind of leaving it be like a negative drain on the environment in which we operate, how can we be net positive? So that now becomes a kind of, if you like, one of the key components of our new sustainability frame. And I'll go into